They had all the ingredients of blockbusters: guns, fists, explosions, and stars with chiseled jaws. But instead of breaking the bank, they broke studio hearts. Some were shelved and forgotten, others were mocked, but today they're beloved. This is 20 action movies that bombed at the box office and then became fan favorites.
Shoot him! Shoot him!
Released in the shadow of the Matrix, Equilibrium was practically invisible when it hit theaters in 2002. With a modest $20 million budget and a grim dystopian tone, it barely cracked $5 million worldwide. Critics weren't kind, brushing it off as a knockoff despite its unique concepts. Director Kurt Wimmer introduced Gun Kata, a stylized blend of martial arts and firearm combat that became the film's calling card. While mainstream audiences didn't bite, word of mouth spread through DVD sales, bootlegs, and online forums. Over time, sci-fi fans began defending its visual flair and cerebral take on emotional repression. Released in 1996, The Phantom was a throwback to 1930s adventure serials. A bright, earnest hero in a purple suit battling ancient cults, greedy tycoons, and jungle traps. Billy Zane, in peak physical form, brought charm and sincerity to the lead role, but the timing was all wrong. Coming off the heels of darker, edgier hits like Batman Returns, audiences weren't ready for something this wholesome. Critics shrugged it off as lightweight, and it barely recouped a third of its $45 million budget. Still, fans of Pulp Fiction and comic book history saw something special. Over the years, The Phantom found its audience through home video, praised for its retro spirit, lush cinematography, and Zane's fully committed performance. When the rundown landed in 2003, it was meant to be Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's big breakout as a leading man. Backed by an $85 million budget and a strong push from Universal, the film paired Johnson with Seann William Scott in a high-energy jungle adventure with comedy, carnage, and Christopher Walken chewing scenery as the villain. Critics were mostly positive, praising the film's brisk pace and Johnson's charisma, but the box office didn't follow. It made just over $80 million globally, which didn't cover its costs, and it quickly faded from theaters. However, the film found new life on DVD and cable, where action fans embraced its mix of classic stunt work and tongue-in-cheek humor. Stone Cold was supposed to launch NFL linebacker Brian Bosworth into action stardom. Directed by Craig R. Baxley, a veteran stunt coordinator, the film had everything a 1991 action flick needed: biker gangs, explosions, and a muscle-bound hero going undercover. But when it hit theaters, the box office response was stone cold. With a $25 million budget, it pulled in barely $9 million. Critics panned it as shallow and derivative, and Bosworth's tough guy persona didn't help sell tickets. Yet over time, Stone Cold gained a second wind on cable and video rentals. Audiences started to appreciate its unfiltered brutality and unapologetic energy. Its villain, played by Lance Henriksen, became a cult figure in his own right. Based on the popular Japanese manga, Crying Freeman was an ambitious international production directed by Christoph Gans, years before he gained recognition for Brotherhood of the Wolf. With Mark Dacascos in the lead, the film blended martial arts, romance, and stylized violence into a poetic assassin tale. But despite a loyal manga fanbase and a visually rich presentation, it never received a wide US theatrical release. Its North American run was limited, and the film ended up going straight to video in many markets. Critics were divided, and the lack of studio support left it buried. However, martial arts aficionados and cult film hunters kept the movie alive. Over the years, it's become a revered hidden gem, praised for its balletic action, surreal tone, and Dacascos' intense emotional performance.
You promised not to hurt them! I lied! Farewell, HeMan.
By 1987, He-Man was one of the biggest toy and cartoon franchises on the planet, so when Masters of the Universe arrived in theaters, expectations were high. But instead of an epic fantasy adventure on Eternia, audiences got a strange mix of Star Wars knockoff, fish-out-of-water Earth comedy, and cost-saving compromises. Dolph Lundgren played He-Man, but the movie was stolen by Frank Langella's Shakespearean take on Skeletor. Cannon Films poured $22 million into the production and barely made it back. Critics panned it, fans were confused, and the planned sequel was cancelled. But over time, nostalgia and hindsight were kind. The film's wild set design, committed performances, and earnest weirdness began to charm viewers. The original Best of the Best surprised audiences with its heartfelt underdog story and emotional weight. So when Best of the Best 2 came out in 1993, it took a hard turn. The sequel ditched the tournament structure and instead became a brutal, revenge-driven underground fight movie. Eric Roberts returned, but the focus shifted to Philip Rhee's character, now battling in a deadly gladiator-style arena called the Coliseum. Critics didn't bite, and neither did audiences. It was a box office flop and went straight to video in many countries. But that's where it found new life. Martial arts fans praised its gritty tone, excellent fight choreography, and the addition of Ralph Moeller as a monstrous opponent.
6, 9, 7.
God damn you, McCallum!
Freejack had a promising setup, a sci-fi action thriller with time travel, body snatching, and a cast featuring Emilio Estevez, Mick Jagger, Anthony Hopkins, and Rene Russo. Released in 1992, the film envisioned a future where the wealthy cheat death by hijacking bodies from the past. But a troubled production, including reshoots, rewrites, and post-production chaos, left the final product feeling uneven. Critics called it incoherent, and audiences stayed away. With a $30 million budget, it barely earned $17 million domestically. Still, Freejack refused to vanish. On cable and VHS, sci-fi fans began to appreciate its grimy future aesthetic and high-concept ideas. While not a polished classic, Freejack grew into a cult curiosity, remembered for its wild premise and for trying something original, even if it didn't quite stick the landing. Grosse Pointe blended sharp action with pitch-black comedy, following John Cusack as a hitman attending his high school reunion while dodging bullets and existential crisis. Released in 1997, the film was a tonal balancing act, part rom-com, part shootout, part midlife meltdown. Despite strong performances from Cusack and Minnie Driver, it struggled at the box office. Against its $15 million budget, it made only modest returns and was quickly overshadowed by flashier late 90s fare. But over time, fans embraced its clever dialogue, killer soundtrack, and surprisingly layered storytelling. On DVD and cable, it became a cult favorite, especially for viewers who connected with its satirical edge and moral ambiguity. Knockoff was meant to be Jean-Claude Van Damme's stylish return to form. Directed by Hong Kong legend Tsui Hark and set in the chaotic world of counterfeit fashion in Hong Kong, it paired Van Damme with Rob Schneider. Yes, really, and threw in explosive stunts, microchip bombs, and high kicks for good measure. But when it hit theaters in 1998, it confused just about everyone. The editing was wild, the plot borderline nonsensical, and the marketing a mess. Critics savaged it, and audiences shrugged. The film barely recouped its $35 million budget, yet in the years since, Knockoff found new appreciation for exactly the things that made it so strange. Tsui Hark's frenetic direction gave it a visual energy that few American action films could match. Fans now see it as a deliriously entertaining oddity, a Van Damme deep cut that's more interesting than most of his studio hits. Drive is one of those films that, had it been properly marketed, could have been a game changer for American martial arts cinema. Released in 1997, it starred Mark Dacascos as a cyber-enhanced fugitive paired with a reluctant everyman, played by Kadeem Hardison. The film was filled with lightning-fast fight choreography, inventive action scenes, and a refreshing buddy dynamic, but due to distribution issues, it never hit theaters in the US. Instead, it went straight to video with minimal promotion. That should have killed it, but it didn't. Word spread quickly among action fans, particularly those hungry for martial arts that didn't rely on shaky cam or stunt doubles. Drive became a cult phenomenon thanks to its jaw-dropping choreography and Dacascos' performance, which showed he could lead an action movie with style and grace. Following the cult success of Escape from New York, John Carpenter returned with Escape from LA in 1996, bringing back Kurt Russell's Snake Plissken for another dystopian mission, this time through a post-apocalyptic Los Angeles. But while the original film was grim and gritty, the sequel leaned into satire, exaggerating the absurdity of its world. Surfboard chases, plastic surgery gangs, and an anti-technology climax left critics and fans divided. With a bloated $50 million budget, it brought in only $25 million worldwide, and many wrote it off as a misguided cash-in. What once felt ridiculous is now viewed as intentional self-parody. Fans who returned to the film discovered a sharp political edge, biting humor, and Russell fully embracing the myth of Plissken. Only the Strong was a rare breed in the early 90s, a martial arts movie that didn't rely on kung fu or karate, but on capoeira, the Afro-Brazilian art form blending dance and combat. Directed by Sheldon Lettich and starring Mark Dacascos, it told the story of a former soldier who returns to a rough Miami high school and uses capoeira to teach discipline and self-respect. It had heart, style, and truly unique choreography, but when it hit theaters in 1993, it barely made a dent. Critics mocked the premise, and the film grossed just a few million before vanishing from cinemas. But on VHS, it found a second wind. Martial arts fans praised its fresh approach, and Dacascos' graceful, explosive moves won over new viewers.
Got any more bright ideas? Yeah, we're gonna go really fast!
On paper, The Last Boy Scout should have been untouchable. It was directed by Tony Scott, written by Shane Black, and starred Bruce Willis at the peak of his wisecracking powers. Add Damon Wayans and a football meets crime underworld, and you had a potential blockbuster. But when it hit theaters in 1991, things didn't go according to plan. Behind the scenes, the production was plagued by ego clashes, rewrites, and tension between the director and cast. The final product, though slick and stylish, felt disjointed to critics. Audiences didn't show up in expected numbers, and it grossed only $59 million domestically against a ballooning budget. But the years have been generous. Fans grew to appreciate its razor-sharp dialogue, gritty tone, and brutal action. It became a VHS mainstay, particularly for those craving unfiltered 90s cynicism. Few action movies fail as gloriously as Samurai Cop. Shot in 1991 on a shoestring budget, the film follows a Los Angeles detective with flowing hair and barely any samurai training as he battles the Japanese katana gang. The acting is stilted, the dialogue is absurd, and the production values are barely above home video quality. Unsurprisingly, Samurai Cop never received a proper theatrical release and was quickly forgotten. But years later, it resurfaced online and on bootleg DVDs, where viewers were stunned by its unintentional hilarity. The awkward cuts, missing dialogue, and bizarre performances transformed it into a so bad it's good icon. Ringo Lam's Full Contact is one of the most blisteringly intense action films of the early 90s. Released in 1992 and starring Chow Yun-fat as a morally gray anti-hero, the film mixes gritty crime drama with stylized violence in the Hong Kong tradition. It's raw, sleazy, and unapologetically brutal, but despite Lam's reputation and Chow's growing fame, Full Contact never made a splash outside of Asia. Its limited international release and grim tone made it a hard sell in Western markets, where audiences leaned towards slicker, more polished action fare. Over time, though, the film earned cult recognition. Fans of heroic bloodshed cinema praised its relentless pacing, bold editing, and unflinching brutality. Chow Yun-fat's performance, full of wounded charisma, gave the film emotional depth that resonated long after the credits rolled. Last Action Hero was supposed to be Arnold Schwarzenegger's next big hit. Instead, it became one of the most infamous flops of the 90s. Released in the summer of 1993, just a week after Jurassic Park, the film attempted to parody action movies while also being one. But audiences didn't get the meta humor, and critics thought it was a bloated mess. With a budget of nearly $85 million, it made only $50 million domestically. But years later, people started to re-watch it. What once seemed misguided now felt ahead of its time. A satirical love letter to the very cliches it mocked. Fans embraced its self-awareness, its chaotic tone, and Arnold's willingness to poke fun at himself. There can be only one. When Highlander debuted in 1986, it seemed like even one was too many for critics and US audiences. Directed by Russell Mulcahy and starring Christopher Lambert, Sean Connery, and Clancy Brown, the film told a centuries-spanning story of immortals locked in battle. It was ambitious, operatic, and backed by a Killer Queen soundtrack, but it bombed in US theaters, earning just $5.9 million against a $16 million budget. Critics were mixed, finding the tone uneven and the narrative confusing. Yet overseas, particularly in the UK, the film thrived, and in the home video market, it gained traction fast. Fans fell in love with its mythology, raw swordplay, and unforgettable villain in the Kurgan. The cult grew big enough to spawn sequels, a TV series, comics, and spin-offs. Highlander may have stumbled out of the gate, but it achieved cinematic immortality, just like its hero. When Big Trouble in Little China hit theaters in 1986, nobody quite knew what to make of it. Directed by John Carpenter and starring Kurt Russell as the hilariously inept trucker-turned-hero Jack Burton, the movie mashed together Chinese mysticism, martial arts fantasy, slapstick comedy, and B-movie tropes, all under the banner of an action film. But 20th Century Fox had no idea how to market it. Audiences went in expecting a straightforward action flick and came out confused. It flopped hard, grossing just $11 million against a $25 million budget. Critics weren't kind either, calling it incoherent and tonally inconsistent. But VHS changed everything. Over the years, the film found its true audience, genre fans who adored its chaos, creativity, and Russell's clueless bravado. Showdown in Little Tokyo had all the ingredients of a high-octane buddy cop classic. Released in 1991, it paired Dolph Lundgren with Brandon Lee in a hyper-violent neon-lit clash against the Yakuza in Los Angeles. The fight scenes were brutal, the one-liners outrageous, and Lee's charisma hinted at a star in the making. But Warner Brothers seemed unsure of what they had. The film was dumped into a limited release, heavily trimmed for violence, and clocked in at just 79 minutes. Critics dismissed it as brainless, and it barely registered at the box office. Yet among martial arts fans and action junkies, it quickly became legendary. On VHS, its relentless pace and Lee's quotable performance won over viewers. Over time, it evolved from forgotten side note to cult essential, a lean, stylish, no apologies action flick that knew exactly what it was.
Don't make waves.
So why did these flops survive? Because fans gave them a second chance, without studio hype or box office pressure. Away from marketing mistakes and bad timing, audiences discovered the raw fun, bold risks, or sheer insanity these films had to offer. They didn't succeed by playing it safe. They stood out by being different, and that difference, once mocked, became exactly what fans came to love. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more awesome content.